Hi, everybody. It's Kate Richberg, and welcome to this edition of Beadshop Basics. Today, I'm going to tackle a real bead shop classic, which is our silk wrap. How to silk wrap, and I'm going to talk to you about how to do the silk wrap with some different materials. We use this silk wrapping technique in a lot of different ways and in a lot of different projects on beadshop.com. Um, so this isn't going to be a technique video. This is just really going to show you the technique so you can refer back to it when you want a quick refresher on your silk wrap. You can see on this piece that I have here in front of me, this section right here at the end where this macrame is finished off and connected to this piece of Chinese knotting cord is closed off using the silk wrapping technique. So let's jump in. I've got what I'm using today. This is some 2mm distressed gray leather. And on that leather, I'm going to be doing 4 different silk wraps with the most common materials we use here at Bead Shop to do that technique. I've got a 0.5 Chinese knotting cord, and you can silk wrap with any of the sizes of the Chinese knotting cord, or CKC as we like to call it here at Bead Shop, but I'm going to use the 5. I'm going to go middle of the road. We've got some Irish wax linen. We're going to use the butterscotch color. This is a 4-ply. I'm going to use the regular Ceylon in this copper rose, though again, you can silk wrap using any size of the Ceylon, but I'm going to use regular today. And then sometimes I like to switch it up and use the 0.5 leather to go ahead and do that silk wrapping as well. So it just depends on, I don't know, I think what the effect is that you want. So let's take a look at how each one works. I'm going to start off with kind of the basics with our regular Ceylon here. And I'm going to cut, this is a little more than a yard, maybe about 14 inches or so. Might be a little bit longer than we need, but I want to have enough so I can show you here. Let me get a little tighter here on this piece, and I'm just going to do a single silk wrap on this. A lot of times what we do is we double over our piece. So maybe actually I'll double it over. I'll do each of these as a loop, but you could also use that silk wrap as a decorative element as well. So I've got my 2mm leather, and let's just say that a clasp was going to go on here, or maybe it was the end of a wrap bracelet, whatever the loop needs to be. So that's the 0.2mm or the 2mm leather here. So with my regular Ceylon, what I do is I kind of fold my Ceylon or whatever cord I'm using into about a 1/3, like here, to about 2/3, which is that long piece there. And then I lay that cord with the loop facing towards where I'm going to be wrapping. Okay. In this case, I'm going to be wrapping from this way up towards this loop. Now, this loop doesn't have to be too big, so you can adjust, like if you feel like, oh, I need a little more thread to wrap with. The loop doesn't have to be that large, so I'm going to take it down just a little bit. And notice the way I'm holding it. It's kind of hard to see under my fingers, but what I'm silk wrapping around these 2 lengths of leather that I've got here, see how they're laying side by side? They're not crossed over like that. That's what we want. And see also here this loop, the thread I'm putting around it that I'm going to silk wrap with. It's also laying side by side. Okay, so I'm going to come here and I'm going to start. I'm right-handed, so I'm holding all of the rest of this business here under my thumb and index finger. So I'm holding the leather and the thread on top of it pretty tightly with my thumb and index finger of my left hand. Now I'm going to come and at a right angle, see how my thread is at a right angle here? I'm going to wrap it around, do one full wrap, and wrap it again. So see how I've wrapped it around here, like so. Now, what I do is I bring it to the left of that wrap. Can you see that? So it's starting to kind of tighten everything up. This is the step, you guys, that if your silk wrap is loose at this point, and see how I can kind of pull away there and I still have that tension. If your silk wrap is loose at this point, take it apart and start again, because it's really difficult if this first wrap isn't really super tight to get it tight later on. And that's the secret to a good sturdy wrap. So can you see how I've switched my hands over and now I'm gripping everything with my right and I'm wrapping with my left. And see how I'm wrapping almost like I do wire, one little coil right next to the other, and it's nestled in. And you can kind of, check your length, see what length you like. I don't need this length to be too long, right? So I'm going to stop when it feels right, right? That looks like a nice length. And at this point, sometimes if you look at it and you go, oh my gosh, my loop is too big, sometimes you can kind of cheat and pull that loop a little bit smaller if you need to, but then your thread might pull through like I did there. So I just need to tighten that first wrap up. So I don't recommend kind of screwing around with the leather after you've kind of done this, but it can be done. Okay, but you can also just unwrap it, readjust your loop, and go from there. Okay, so now once I've done that last little wrap around, I'm going to come and instead of wrapping around the leather, I'm going to send it through the loop of the seal-on there. See that? So now it's like you always need a third hand to help you here. Now I'm going to hold this again in my left hand, holding everything tight. With my right hand, I'm going to pull on that tail and see how it pulls that loop closed, tight. And it's kind of hard to see on camera, but right here you can see where that loop has captured this thread. Now I want to pull that underneath so it goes about halfway down these wraps that I've made so it's nice and secure. So sometimes I have to get my finger on there to do it, but you can see how it's traveling like a little mole in a molehill underneath these wraps, and I can feel that connection where the thread grabbed that loop and pulled it under is right there. Okay, and so the tails, this tail and this tail, are buried down here in the center of that wrap. And I check both sides, and if I have to kind of wiggle it to get the wrap nice and tight and nice and even on both sides, I can. Then you could, if you feel like, oh my gosh, is this really going to stay? Before you pull this loop down, you could put just a touch of glue there so that GS Hypo Cement just pulls down inside. But I very rarely glue my silk wraps because these ends are buried and they're not going anywhere. I also wanted to show you, I may not have showed you before I cut these tails, I tighten both, right? I pull on both of these tails and that kind of tightens everything up to make it just nice and even and clean. Okay, so then I'm going to come in with my thread snips and under tension just clip the thread away, trying not to nick anything else. But you can see here how we've got a very nice silk wrap. Now if this were the end of something here, I'd come and I'd maybe cut it a little bit closer there at an angle at the end. So let's very quickly just do this again with our Irish wax linen. And I'm going to do this a little bit more in Kate time so you can see how this looks. Let me get that loop. Each of the different materials that you use to silk wrap are going to give you a little bit of a different effect. This Irish wax linen is nice because it has a little bit of a bite to it, right? That wax really stays where where you put it as you line everything up. I really am making these loops kind of big, so I'm gonna pull that down a little bit more. There we go. And if you notice that, it's better to adjust the loop. See how much better that loop adjustment went when I didn't have so many wraps going on. So now here, I think I've wrapped quite enough. I'll go through that loop, grab this side, pull it down, and see here, as I pull, that's when that loop captures that thread, and then I continue to pull it underneath these wraps. There we go. And if my thumb is on top, I can feel that knot move down till it gets to about the center. Tighten both ends, pull on both ends to make everything nice and tight. And again, under tension, clip away that extra cord. Let's do this one more time with the Chinese knotting cord. So now we've got our two samples there. Let's go with the CKC, the spring leaf. Again, about a foot or so. I'm using quite a bit. Let's make that loop. Let's try and make that loop a little bit smaller this time. The Chinese knotting cord, again, you can use any size. This is the 0.5, but you could go down to the 4 or up to the 8. Doesn't matter. I also wanted to, a question you might have is, well, Kate, with this loop, do you have to have the short end coming at the bottom or at the top? It doesn't really matter which way you do that. You can wrap it however you want, and you can wrap it one way or the other. Doesn't make any difference. You just need to be obviously consistent in the direction that you're wrapping as you're making this silk wrap. I have a tendency to wrap from down from, I guess, from the top to the bottom and then back up again. That's just kind of how I do it. And you want to lay these wraps one next to the other, no gaps in there, right? If you have gaps, kind of fix them as you go along. So here's this. We've tightened everything up. Go through that loop, hold on to that with your opposite hand, and start to pull to make that loop a little smaller. And then that loop will pull down right there in the middle. It's where you kind of want to get it. Pull on both ends to tighten. And again, let's go ahead and clip those tails under tension. Now I've saved this 0.5 leather for last because that one can be the trickiest. What I want to do when I'm wrapping with 0.5 millimeter leather, you want to check it before you use it, right? So what I do is I kind of, give it a little pull like this to make sure that there aren't any flaws in the section that I'm going to be wrapping. Because when I pull, and if there's a little tiny flaw that you don't see, it'll break your thread. Your leather will break. So I just do that loop on top of the loop. Same technique, just different material. You could also do this with a 1 millimeter, probably will work as well, but I like using this 0.5. So here we go. Those first couple of wraps, nice and tight. I'll switch everything over to my right hand. It's a little harder to get that first wrap tight with this 0.5 millimeter, so you may have to try it a couple of times, but that's okay. You can just undo it and rewrap it. So here we go. I've wrapped. Let's go through just that leather loop, that 0.5 millimeter leather. Now I'll come in and I'm going to tighten And this is a little harder to get underneath there, so you kind of want to make sure that everything is right there. And then you want to pull it. This is the danger zone right here where the leather could break if it has a flaw. But I felt it. It went right to that center. I'm going to pull both and I'm going to clip. I'm going to clip here. I'm going to clip here. And there. Okay. So what I have here are all 4 types of the silk wrapping. Let's take a look. We've done it in the regular the regular Ceylon. That I used the copper rose. I used the butterscotch Irish wax linen. I used the what is this, spring leaf 0.5 millimeter Chinese knotting cord. And then last but not least, we've got our 0.5 millimeter leather cord right there. So that's all there is to it. Silk wrapping is great for a whole bunch of products, or projects rather, from our different projects that we have here on beadshop.com. Go check out our projects section over on beadshop.com and you can see a whole bunch of fun things that we have going on there, different techniques and projects for you to do. And of course, don't forget to follow us on our social, beadshop.com on Instagram, join us over at the Bead Table on Facebook, and of course, hit that like and subscribe button right on YouTube, whether you're watching live or on this replay. That way you won't miss any of our great tutorials that we put out for you. Well, enjoy your silk wrapping, everybody. It's a terrific technique, and I can't wait to see what you do with it. Thanks so much.